cholera's coming, oh dear, oh dear. The cholera's coming, oh dear. To prevent hunger's call, pest from Bengal has come to feed all with the cholera, dear.
Cholera was the killer disease of the 19th century. It was as fatal as the Black Death had been in the Middle Ages. But until 1817, it had only been known in India, in the swamps of Bengal on the Ganges Delta. But in 1817, it began to travel, slowly, along the trade routes of the world. By 1830, it was in Moscow. By May 1831, it reached the Baltic coast. As Britain traded with the Baltic ports, how long would it be before cholera crossed the North Sea? Britain did not wait long. It was in the port of Sunderland in County Durham on the 23rd of October, 1831, that the first official case of cholera was diagnosed. On the 26th of October, William Sproat, keelman, died in the squalid, insanitary tenements that lay alongside the River Wear. As other deaths followed, panic spread through the northeast. Stockton-on-Tees was then, as it is now, a busy industrial and market town. Its high street is still the widest in the land. In 1831, it was also a busy port. But between the port and the high street, and beyond it to the west, there lay a labyrinth of courts and alleys, tightly packed with houses that were crowded, dirty, and ill-ventilated. Stagnant water lay in pools. Cesspits were emptied into the streets at night. Pigsties and manure heaps lay outside the tightly shut windows of the houses and tenements. Water was scarce and impure. The town had only 3 pumps and some water carriers to supply its water. Back in June, the government in London had established a Board of Health and encouraged each town and village to do the same. Stockton formed a Board of Health on the 3rd of November, which met 4 days later in the town hall to hear the news from Sunderland. Its chairman was Dr. John Addy, senior physician of the town, with a busy practice in the High Street. The secretary was Dr. Richard Headlam Keenlyside. He too had a high street practice. The other members were John Cartwright, magistrate and church warden, the Reverend John Cundell, vicar of Stockton, Joshua Arrowsmith, his curate, Robert Lamb, merchant, William Skinner, banker and an overseer of the poor, and Leonard Raisbeck, recorder of Stockton, and a prime mover in building the Stockton and Darlington Railway.
Gentlemen, I have to tell you that in the opinion of the doctors sent to Sunderland, the pestilence there is the same Asiatic cholera to be found in India.
Then what must be done?
Keenlyside?
The instructions from the Board of Health in London are quite clear. We must first of all establish a quarantine station at the river mouth for all vessels that enter the port of Stockton, from the Baltic or from along the English coast. The vessels will only be allowed to enter the port after they have been fumigated and declared free of all suspicion.
That will require great vigilance, Dr. Keenlyside, with so many vessels, large and small.
It'll require more than vigilance, man. It'll need a man of war.
And then I shall send for one.
You'll do no such thing. You want to ruin the trade of this town? I've got 3 shiploads of flax on the way from Riga. There's 40 tons of bar iron in the North Sea waiting to come in now.
And think of the coal that'll lie idle on the wharfs. The strain on the railroad will be intolerable.
Anyway, how can you be sure this is the Cholera morbus? Not read the Yorkshire Gazette. There's a doctor in there says it's nothing but the old-fashioned English diarrhea. I know ladies in this neighbourhood have cured their servants of this so-called Cholera morbus a damn sight quicker than the whole College of Physicians.
I doubt you do, sir. Neither you nor the good ladies will have seen the effects of the Cholera morbus. Dr. Kell of Sunderland saw it, with the army in Mauritius. And I saw it in Madras. And I pray to God that I never see it here. We have no choice but to impose the quarantine.
We shall also need to post guards on the Sunderland Road. And we shall turn away vagrants and stop all the carriers' carts. If we find any old clothes, bedding, or any suspicious articles, then we must disinfect them.
And how do you propose to go about this disinfection?
Chlorine gas made from chloride of lime is an agent of undoubted efficiency.
Chlorine in the hulls of my ships? You'll ruin the fibres of the flax.
All that will be needed will be a few lead pipes to circulate the gas. Your flax will not be harmed.
I wish I could share your confidence, Doctor.
Have you yet any notion of the cause of the pestilence, Dr. Addy?
Opinion is divided. I believe that cholera lies dormant in filth and stagnant water until it is freed by some unknown agent in the atmosphere.
Whereas it is my opinion that it's spread by touch and by contact with a person, clothes, or bedding of the infected.
But we both agree that the best protection against cholera is cleanliness. It is this ward's duty to cleanse the town before it is too late.
Well, the town expects us to act, and we must keep their confidence. Tell us what we must do, and we shall do it. Will the quarantine be enough?
No. I suggest that we divide the town into 11 districts, with a committee in charge of each one. The committees would be responsible to us, and they would remove all nuisances, cleanse the streets, and lime wash the dwellings of the poor.
They should also find common herring barrels and fill them with a mixture of sea salt, water, manganese, and strong sulfuric acid, and place them in the courts and alleyways, and require the inhabitants to open their windows.
And if the inhabitants won't cooperate, or the owners of the houses?
Then there are 2 magistrates on this board who will make sure they do.
And we must prepare a hospital and recruit nurses. The charity school would make a most suitable building for a hospital.
And who's going to pay for all this, eh? I mean, the poor rates are enough as it is already.
I suggest we raise a public subscription. Then if the restrictions to the port cause distress, we can provide relief and meet the cost of medicine and the line for cleansing.
Can we agree, gentlemen? A quarantine on shipping, a guard on the Sunderland Road, a hospital in the charity school, and a public subscription to meet the cost.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Then let us ask God's aid in these our labors. Almighty God, who has visited the nations near us with the sudden death of thousands, spare this thy favored land, and give us through Christ that pardon which tomorrow it may be too late to ask.
Amen. Amen.
Amen.
Prayer, quarantine, and lime wash. I hope there'll be enough.
For a while, they seemed to be enough. From the northeast, the cholera spread north and south, to reach Edinburgh and London almost simultaneously in January 1832. Yet Stockton was spared. But Stockton's relief was short-lived. For on the 16th of July, the disease broke out there with great violence. Despite all the efforts of the board, a cleanup of the town had proved impossible. The cholera hospital was overwhelmed as the disease spread from house to house, street to street, family to family. By the 19th of August, the graveyard in the parish church was full. John Short, aged 50, was the first man to be buried in the new burial ground to the south of the town. There were never any gravestones over the cholera pit, but a group of trees still marks the spot today. Not until late September did the outbreak cease. By then, 126 of the 604 cholera cases were dead. But for the exhausted Dr. Keenlyside, the cholera year was not over. On the night of the 7th of October, he received an urgent plea to ride to Hutton Rugby, a village of handloom weavers 9 miles away. A weaver, John Cook, had 6 days before returned to Hutton Rugby from Newcastle. He arrived home at 9. 3 hours later, he was dead of the cholera. He died in great agony, his features black, his body convulsed into a ball. The body was washed, laid out, and kept until next day. Within hours, the woman who had washed his clothes and most of those who had come to pay their respects to the dead man had the cholera. Next morning, one of the village inns, the Bay Horse, did not open as usual. When the Reverend Barlow, vicar of the parish, broke into the inn,
we found James Catchasides, the landlord, dead by the fire, and his wife and all his family dead around the inn. I have buried 6 today, including the village surgeon. 4 the day before. This man fell ill yesterday.
Oh, Mr. Barlow, sir.
Elizabeth. This is Dr. Keenlyside, who's come from Stockton to help us.
Good evening, Elizabeth.
Good evening, sir.
How long has your husband been ill?
Well, 2 days ago, sir, my man was fit and well. And then he carried our neighbour's coffin down to the church. When he come home, he had a great looseness in his bowels, sir, and he vomited up green bile. And he's got terrible cramps in both his legs, sir. He's forever saturated. I know I cannot keep him clean.
He says he's certain he will die and asks only that we leave him alone.
Please tell me that it's not the black illness and that he'll not die.
The pulse is imperceptible at the wrist, and his extremities are cold.
I'm damned. Give me water. Water.
Could it not be the English diarrhea, sir? He's greedy for water.
No, your man has cholera.
And is there no cure?
There are 1,000 remedies, but no cure. What has been done for him so far?
The surgeon spread powdered mustard on poultices of porridge and applied them to his feet and stomach.
No, sir, no. Not again, sir, not again.
They were to keep your body warm, man, but we'll use them no more. Hot baths would be useful, but impossible here. He's reached the stage of collapse. The next few hours will be crucial. I want you to pass this flannel roller thrice around his abdomen. Surround him with hot water bottles, hot bricks, or hot bags of bran. I will give him opium and calomel for his bowels. All else we may do is watch and wait. I will return tomorrow.
Oh, sir, please pray for us.
A word with you, Barlow, before I see your other patients. Barlow, you have an epidemic on your hands. You must write at once for permission to form a board of health. The village must be quarantined, the clothes and bedding of the dead destroyed, and their bodies buried beneath 4 feet of earth to prevent contagion. I will return with other medical men. We will help as best we can. Town or village, Barlow? It's squalor and filth that breed this wretched cholera.
Hutton Rugby became a village of the dead. The weavers' looms fell silent. Almost a third of the population fled. While Keenlyside and Dr. Allardyce from nearby Stokesley fought the cholera, Barlow isolated the stricken community. Barriers where farmers left food blocked all roads. Daily the brave clergyman, the Reverend Barlow, calmed the fears of the fearful and ministered to the dying. At night, he and men of the village carried coffins past the deserted bay horse and down the hill to the cholera pit, which Barlow had helped to dig on the north side of the church. Only an unmarked mound remains today to show where Hutton's victims were so hurriedly buried. They included James Passman, his wife and son. Only his daughter Rachel survived to enter the workhouse. Dr. Keenlyside lived to fight the cholera again at Stockton in the national epidemic years of 1849 and 1853-54. He died without knowing cholera's cause or cure. At Hutton, he had noticed that the disease was confined to the neighborhood of the first victim, John Cook, and that the worst cases were in the houses whose back doors opened into Jackson's yard, with its common well and nearby privy. Other doctors, too, came near guessing the truth, that cholera spread when the supply of water became polluted by the excrement of cholera victims. It was not until 1884 that Robert Koch, the German scientist, isolated the cholera bacteria, or Vibrio, shaped like a tiny comma. It was this Vibrio that embedded itself into the intestines of the victims and killed them rapidly by dehydration. Nowadays, a cholera victim would be treated by a saline injection to replace the lost fluid. But if cholera had been the scourge of the poor, it had also been its ally. Cholera was no respecter of social class. It first killed the poor, but soon began to kill the rich. So the epidemics brought a slow improvement in public health. In Stockton and all over Britain, new laws allowed old slums to be demolished and new houses built with pure water and better drainage along new glazed earthenware pipes. The fight against cholera helped in the conquest of tuberculosis, typhoid, smallpox, and the high rates of child and infant mortality. In this sense, the thousands of unknown and long-forgotten cholera victims did not die in vain.
Shuddering humanity asks, who are these, and what their crime? They fell by one disease, by the blue pest whose grip no art can shun, no force outwrench, outsingled one by one, at noon, at midnight, seized the weak, the strong, asleep, awake, alone, amid the throng. Killed like a murderer, fixed its icy hold and wrung out life with agony of cold. And this tremendous seal impressed on all, bury me out of sight and out of call.